My name is Purge, but you can call me Purge, and in this video I'm going to cover my top 5 super weapons in Star Wars Legends and Canon. This video was suggested to me by my amazing Discord server members, all the proper links in the description, and now, starting off with number 5, we have... My number 5 pick is the DS-1 Battle Station, aka the Death Star. It's the first super weapon we ever see in Star Wars, and it's the thing that I scale up all super weapons against. I'm not going to say much about the Death Star since it's like the most well-known super weapon, and I'm sure most of you already know about it. But I will say that I'm a giant fan of the lore. I love the dynamic between Krennic and Tarkin, and overall I think Rogue One is probably one of the best showings of the Death Star. I will say that George Lucas tried to have some lore for the Death Star and Attack of the Clones, with the Geonosians, but I think Rogue One just did a much better job of building it up. And before I go into number 4, I just also want to talk about the second Death Star. And to be honest, I'm just not much of a fan of the DS2. I feel like it was kind of a cheap way to add stakes to Return of the Jedi, and I would much rather we just had some sort of, like, big space battle as the climax, or like them raiding some sort of base or something. And I feel like this Death Star 2, it makes sense how they explained it, but I also feel like from a storytelling perspective, it kind of reminds me of like bringing back Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker. Just kind of annoying. Anyways, I do love the Return of the Jedi, and it's a nitpick since it makes sense in the story, with it being a trap for the rebellion, and overall just being a symbol of the Empire's might to build another Death Star and destroy the rebellion with it. But, yeah. Anyways, on to something that's a little bit less well known, aka number 4. These two super weapons are polar opposites, but also exactly the same. The Defoliator is a weapon that targets any sentient life in its area and kills them, and the Electroproton Bomb disables any electronic systems in its target area. The Defoliator has been seen in the Clone Wars in 3 episodes and in 1 episode of Tales of the Empire, and was developed by the CIS. It played a major role in the massacre of the Night Sisters of Dathomir, and it was also mentioned heavily in Star Wars Legends, and it's also the same bomb that awakened the Zillo Beast in the Clone Wars. I love these super weapons because out of any super weapon it feels like the most sane. In any large battle, a military leader might want to destroy an entire enemy army, but also like leave their army perfectly unharmed. So both these weapons are really good because you can use one of them on an army of your enemies, but in the Clone Wars you could pretty much trust that your soldiers would all be okay. Of course, that would mean that if you were a clone, you would need to make sure you don't have any droids in your battle, or like vehicles. But if you were a droid, you could pretty much guarantee, as long as no organic commanders were nearby, that you'd be perfectly safe. Unless they were using Electroproton Bomb. Anyways, I actually have a little bonus one for you. So, basically, number 3.5. So for this bonus, I'm picking the Subjugator class heavy cruiser. So since I want to use at least some of these spots to cover the wacky super weapons I know you all came for me to talk about, I'm going to have to put the Subjugator as a bonus. I do love it, but it's not quite one of my... I really think it makes sense, but it's probably not one of my favorite, if when favorite you mean really fun, little wacky legend super weapon. Anyways, this Subjugator is basically a super weapon for the Separatists. It's also probably the most well-known super weapon I've mentioned in this video, other than the Death Star. It was in the first season of the Clone Wars, and it's the same ship type as the Malevolence, that again is in the first season of the Clone Wars that like takes down Mace Windu, and then all the heroes have to sneak on board it and deactivate it. Probably got a couple mistakes there, just because I haven't watched that arc in a long while. But, anyways, quick little just bonus mention. But now I'm going to cover the wacky legends super weapons that don't necessarily make the most sense, and I'm actually glad they're no longer canon. But they're just really fun, and because of that, I can't help but love them. The Sun Crusher is probably the most overpowered superweapon in all of Star Wars. Its entire purpose is to destroy entire star systems by, you guessed it, crushing suns, or more accurately, they're crushing stars. It works by firing a projectile into a sun and turning into a giant supernova, which just explodes and destroys an entire system, which is, multiple planets. Anyways, the Sun Crusher is almost completely indestructible, while being only about the size of a TIE bomber. To get a kind of sense of how unbreakable this ship is, let me just tell you what its armor was able to deflect. Namely, a Star Destroyer's turbo lasers, ramming through the entire bridge of said Star Destroyer, the prototype Death Star's super laser being fired upon it. Somehow, the Sun Crusher managed to shrug off the blast from a Death Star super laser, though it's important to note that it is only a prototype super laser that can only destroy a small moon and not a full planet. But, still. Anyways, the Sun Crusher had 11 of its projectiles, so in theory, it could destroy 11 whole star systems before it needed to resupply, and there was also multiple Sun Crushers. So basically, the Sun Crusher is just an indestructible starfighter that can destroy entire systems in a matter of hours. So basically, the only limit to the amount of systems it can destroy is the imagination of the pilot.
Imagination!
The only Sun Crusher was actually destroyed when it was sucked into a black hole. So as of right now, the Sun Crusher is also only a part of Legends, and honestly, thank God. To be honest, I'm not a fan of super weapons that can destroy this much. The Death Stars are, for me, what I would say the pinnacle level of destruction, right? I don't think that there should be super weapons that are more destructive than the Death Star. Now, I don't say that, things that have the potential to do more damage than the Death Star are bad, but, Starkiller Base, to me, feels like too much. And then same with this. This just feels like how big of a threat the Death Star was considered. I don't like the idea of having a bunch of other way stronger super weapons. And the Sun Crusher also just feels to me like overkill. The Death Star, first and foremost, was a symbol of the Empire's strength, but, it doesn't really provide much of a strategic advantage to be able to destroy systems, because, especially when you're fighting, the Rebellion or something, they don't really have a home system. They normally will hide out in the same location as a bunch of other normal people. But, yeah, I will say that it doesn't really look very silly. It's a dumb idea for a weapon, but it doesn't look that dumb. So let's go and cover the dumbest looking super weapon right up next. The whole purpose of this giant gun floating in space is to basically stay in one location and fire a torpedo through hyperspace to destroy a system world or location. These torpedoes are quite large and around the same size as some sort of small shuttle. The torpedoes have heavy armor and shields, plus their own turbo lasers to protect it. And anyways, these torpedoes can be programmed to do a certain level of damage, so they could destroy anything in the range of a small town to an entire world. The torpedoes move at the speeds of a Class 1 hyperdrive, so it means that it's faster than a lot of military ships, and almost exactly the same speed as the Millennium Falcon. The Galaxy Gun is technically a giant ship, like the Death Star, but it can't really move that much, and when it does, it's very slow. But it's about the range of 5 to 20 Star Destroyers long, and this is mostly because we have multiple size estimates from different books and drawings and comics and such. And it's mostly just an estimation at this point based off of those different sources. So I might say 10 Star Destroyers long. just if you want to get like in the middle between the two different estimations. Anyways, the Galaxy Gun spends most of its time floating around the world of Biss, protected by a fleet of warships. The Galaxy Gun itself did not have many weapons at all, but it had hundreds of surrounding ships that made attacking it suicide. In the end, the Galaxy Gun was destroyed by the Eclipse II Super Star Destroyer, crashed into it, but its short lifespan caused the New Republic a whole lot of chaos. To be honest, the Galaxy Gun is completely idiotic, but it's also part of the more absurd part of Legends that you just have to love, where the Empire gets revived almost every couple years, and a giant super weapon is just an everyday Tuesday night. I just kind of find the Galaxy Gun kind of silly, and it's probably the weapon that everyone turns to when they say Legends kept on trying to one-up itself, because this is like the ultimate kind of meme weapon. But that storyline that actually had the Galaxy Gun in it is also like the embodiment of that, because it also introduced the Eclipse II Super Star Destroyer, which is like the largest Star Destroyer in all of Star Wars. And I put the Galaxy Gun on this list because I do love it, but only because of how stupid it is. Basically, I love to make fun of the weapon, but it is kind of got like that Legends charm. If we want to talk about actually good Legends super weapons, we're going to have to talk about my favorite super weapon in all of Star Wars, the Starforge has to be my absolute favorite Star Wars super weapon, and it was built by the Rakatan Empire about 5,000 years before the rise of the Galactic Empire. The Rakata were a very cruel and dark side-oriented species, so soon the Starforge itself became a nexus for dark side energy. Because of all the immense power the Starforge required, it began to corrupt the Rakata, and soon after, the Rakatan Empire collapsed entirely. The Starforge was a giant space station, and its entire purpose was to create a perfect navy, operating in the most efficient way possible. And it created those ships via its heavily self-sustaining, God, oh my god, alright, its most efficient self-sustaining factory. It could create a fleet of ships in mere days, and millions of battle droids within hours. The Starforge actually used materials from nearby planets and stars to gain the resources to create its ships. And since it was built with the possibility of being crewed by one person, it had to be able to protect itself without the need for physical sentient creatures, which led to every ship of the fleet being able to operate without any sentient life. Of course, a lot of ships in the fleet would end up being crewed by a pretty small skeleton crew, but it had the option to just be crewed by no one. Revan used the Starforge during the Old Republic era to try and take over the galaxy for his Sith Empire. The Starforge was sadly destroyed by a Jedi fleet, though, but I do love the Starforge because, well, it just looks cool. Okay, I am joking, but I really do love it, and it's because it's just a simple concept, but also just kind of overpowered. Me personally, I would rather have a perfectly efficient factory than a super weapon that destroys planets. Because planet destruction is just not that practical if you think about it, because just think about how many lives and resources will be destroyed. But creating hundreds of thousands of warships for only the cost of a single star is much better deal because you're still preserving lots of territory. And as far as we know, it doesn't make the stars that dangerous. Like if you destroyed a star in, I don't know, the same system as Alderaan, Alderaan itself would be perfectly fine. It would just have a drained star, which would not become a supernova or anything. I don't know why. Because technically the star is dead, and it should go on to, like, kill everything, but it just doesn't for some reason. Anyways, since there are billions of stars in Star Wars, the effects of removing one star would actually be not that bad. and in the multiple years Revan was using the Starforge, he only actually destroyed a single star, and there was no real effect on the planets and moons next to it. Eventually it did create a nebula, but again, for the most part, nebulas in Star Wars don't seem to be that destructive for the planets not in them, and they're not that big, and, judging by how big space is, it wouldn't really have much of an effect on any other planets. But honestly, I just love the Starforge, and it's probably one of my favorite parts of KOTOR. Oh my, this last section, I'm just making so many errors. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, how about you subscribe or join my Discord server, link in the description. Sorry for plugging my Discord server in like every video, but I really want to get more members on it. Anyways, if you think I missed your favorite super weapon, tell me in the comments. If you have a video idea for me, let me know in the comments, or better yet, tell me in my Discord server. I'm sorry. Anyways, thanks for watching, and with that, peace the hell out.